Given that we are biological creatures, why do we need meaning? Why do humans need to do all this extra work in order to be satisfied with life?
Well, I have to tell you that I've been going through since the publication of the book, I've been going through a serious reflection on this question again and going deeper into it. There's many levels of answering that question. At one level, meaning has to do with sense making. It has to do with how we properly pay attention to the right kind of information that can allow us to reliably solve a wide variety of problems in a wide variety of domains. And that's one aspect of meaning, that sort of agentic aspect. But consonant with that is we need to be connected to other people, because most of our problem solving is done in connection with other people. So there's an initial sense-making dimension. This is often talked about as sort of coherence in the meaning in life literature. Does your world sort of, is your sense-making sense to you, is how I sometimes put it. Like the sense-making is what you're doing sort of automatically, and when you reflect on it, you go, yeah, that makes sense. My world isn't absurd, or things like that. And then we need to feel connected to other people, because most of our problem solving is done via other people. That's our great superpower. Individually, biologically, as you framed it, we're pretty pathetic animals. You know, a really angry dog can take us out. And so our superpower is we can coordinate together and train some of those dogs and sharpen some of those sticks and then kill anything on the planet. And so we need to be connected to other people. And that brings with it its own special problem. My friend Greg Enriquez made sort of prevalent. We developed the superpower of connecting and coordinating called language. And language is something really, really powerful in helping us coordinate, but it also does something really novel. It makes the content of our minds accessible. We're sort of exposed to each other in a way in which no other organism is exposed to its fellow creatures. And so we have to also develop this way of balancing between coordinating with other people, but not being overexposed. So we have to develop relationships of trust and forgiveness and belonging. And we have to balance between being individuals and having an individual identity and a group identity. So that's all central to meaning. And then beyond that, we fall prey in both of those domains to massive self-deception. I don't pay attention to the right things. I misframe you. I'm biased in my attitude towards you. And so we have to do a lot to correct that. We have to try and ameliorate that. And what that means is we also have to be connected to standards by which we can correct ourselves. Standards about what is most real, what is best, what is most beautiful. And that's a deeper kind of connectedness. That's kind of a connectedness to what we consider ultimacy. So I've tried to show you how all of these things are all important dimensions in why we have to pursue meaning in life. I've become increasingly dissatisfied with the standard psychological construct called meaning in life to measure and talk about all those dimensions in a coordinated fashion.
Can you talk to me about the sort of established body of work when it comes to meaning and how you diverge from that, or what you would suggest as an improvement?
Yeah, so the standard metrics are around sort of 4 dimensions, really 3. One is coherence, which I mentioned, which is, does your sense making make sense to you? Another one is purpose. That's not well posed. Because if you think standardly of how people think of purpose is you're working towards some ultimate goal. That's a very dangerous way of framing meaning, because if you never reach a goal, your life was meaningless. And if you reach it going forward, you're pretty meaningless. And I discovered that way back in high school, and that sort of really bothered me. And so I think what they're talking about more is orientation. And then orientation is a more important way. People have to feel not disoriented, but oriented in the world. And then the next one they talk about is significance, that you have things in your life that aren't transitory, ephemeral, shallow, but But that seems to be just sort of one side of this deeper thing, which is called mattering. You need to feel connected to something. People typically use the metaphor bigger than yourself. I want to be connected to something larger than myself, right? They don't mean that literally, because that would be ridiculous. Attaching you to a locomotive engine doesn't give you a profound sense of meaning in life. So what's going on there is, I would argue something like this. There's a deep connection between the sense of bigger and more real. And let me try and give you an everyday example of this. When you're in a dream world, you're in this little world and it seems so real to you. And then you wake up. Notice we have all these waking up metaphors and enlightenment metaphors. You wake up, and from that larger world, you can see how the earlier world, the smaller world, is limited in biasing you and warping and thwarting you in you trying to get a flourishing life. And I think that's what people are really struggling with when they're talking about mattering, about being connected to something larger than themselves. And it's this sense of realness, which I don't think is properly captured just by the psychological notion of mattering. And here's the fundamental thing. I mentioned that meaning has to do with being connected to something that's more real than yourself in some important ways, because it helps make you feel more real to yourself. Now, that's a problematic notion to think of as just purely, I'm just describing something like a standard psychological phenomena. This is actually, if you'll allow me one technical term, this is a normative term. Meaning is, a meaningful life is not a description. When I say your life is meaningful, I'm not just describing it, I'm praising it. I'm saying there's something fundamentally good to it. It's meeting some standards of evaluation. But those standards of evaluation are completely absent from the standard psychological model. That would be the crux. That's one of my two main criticisms. And so, in a very deep sense, the meaning in the standard meaning in life psychological model is completely divorced from the cultivation of wisdom and virtue. And if you look across all the religion and philosophical traditions, that's not the case. They're deeply wound together, bound together, right? So the cultivation of meaning and the cultivation of virtue and the cultivation of wisdom are profoundly intertwined. Stoicism, in fact, said they're exactly identical, which tells you how strong some positions have been on this. And the psychological model is missing all that. The second one is the psychological model, and this is ironic because it's talking a lot about connectedness, but it doesn't talk about the connectedness. What I mean by that is it only talks about the individual agent's attitudes. It doesn't talk about how the world is showing up for them. So let me give you an example of how this can go wrong. You can ask somebody, and you ask them the standard sort of questions on meaning in life, and they have friends and they have family and they have work projects, so their life is pretty meaningful, above average. But you ask them, do you think your world's very coherent? Do you think the world makes a lot of sense? Do you have a lot of trust in the world? Is the world presenting itself with a lot of beauty and depth to you? And you'll get people saying exactly the opposite. And then if you ask people, is your meaning in life actually bringing you a lot of peace? Is it really integrating you well as a person? Is it reciprocally opening you to reality? Is it no? Because people are experiencing a lot of burnout, a lot of bullshit, and a lot of betrayal. They're losing trust and faithfulness in their institutions and in fellow people, right? And so there's a famine of people being able to get into the flow state, in able to have that basic trust and forgiveness with others, fellowship, and a sense of faithfulness is massively diminishing. I just saw a report that Americans' trust in the Supreme Court is at an all-time historical low. It has never been so low. And of course, that is only prescient, I think, of what's happening all throughout the Western world. And so the meaning in life construct is leaving out all of this that's really bedeviling people in a very, very, very powerful way. And so I think the meaning in life construct gets a little bit about how our agency works and contributes to meaning in life, but it's leaving out a lot. Let me put it one last sentence and then I'll stop. The issue isn't just about finding information relevant. It's about, can you enter into resonance? This is what Rosa calls this relationship that is so centrally lacking in most of our life. Does your meaning in life allow you to reciprocally open? Does it take you into the depths of the psyche and align them? Does it take you into the depths of reality so you feel you're meeting standards that allow you to correct yourself according to what is true and good and beautiful? Is it doing any of that? So that's resonance. And then resonance also needs to be transmuted into reverence. Are you ultimately oriented to what you consider ultimately most real? Because that's the judge behind everything else that we're evaluating.